فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان
Assalamu alaikum, may peace be upon all of you. We are here on a Fruitful Voice podcast where there is a voice to be heard. And we have a guest.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm Jace, a new recent Shahada in the last 2 months, so I'm excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Thank you for coming and accepting this invitation. So we've done this pod show before, but that was more like a test run, a trial run. So I'm going to say that this is really the first official pod show, and I think this is going to be a good one. We're not going to go too long. We're just going to pretty much talk about the Quran in general, right? I have a book here actually by Jamal Zarabozo, How to Approach and Understand the Quran. I highly recommend this book. You should check it out if you want to, if you're a Muslim or someone who wants to understand the Quran in general, and you want to learn the Quran, and you want to pretty much figure out how you can implement it into your lifestyle. And this book definitely, it's very thorough, and I actually mentioned it in one of my talks. It's very thorough, and it gives you some good information. So that leads us to the topic of what we're going to be talking about today, and that is the Quran, implementing the Quran in our lifestyle, right? Talking about this beautiful book and how the knowledge that comes from it and from the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whereas one of his wives had told us that his character was as if he was the walking Quran. He was like the walking Quran. So it shows that his example is the Quran put into practice. When we look at his lifestyle, right? And there's no other human being in history who has their whole entire life recorded like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we can see this, many of the hadith, you look, it's thorough, it's very thorough. And when you're looking through the hadith, you can see how the Quran is implemented, how the certain verses came down, how these verses were used to govern the people of that time, how these verses were adopted into the lifestyles of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's pretty much what we're going to be talking about today. So I just want to ask, if you have any questions you want to start us off with, or I guess I can lead into it.
No, I think for the most part, I guess before we begin, I should say how this is kind of an amazing opportunity for not only people who are or have been Muslim for years or since birth even, but also for new shahadas or even people that are kind of struggling with their faith in Islam as a religion, because I'm going to give very layman terms, and he's going to be able to give details on whatever we talk about. So right. it's a great mix that we have here and at this very moment. And as someone that had came into Islam and becoming Muslim from a completely different lifestyle, very randomly and sporadically, it has taken over my life in such a very positive way, that we hope to share all of that with you.
Inshallah. So that's a nice thing to pretty much start us off with, and I should have started off by, saying the dua, Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ba'd. Right? We want to glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and, send peace and blessings upon the messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And as he mentioned, and it's funny, I was actually thinking that it's a very good mix, a very good combination here, because between the two of us, I'm someone who was born and raised. He's someone who came into Islam. You know, I'm someone who may have some more experience with Islam. He's someone who's coming into Islam and starting off and gaining that experience. So it's a very good mix, alhamdulillah. And I guess I'll start by talking, you know, a little bit about my story. I don't really get into too much detail, but it's a very beautiful story. And pretty much it was me growing up practicing my religion because my parents told me to practice it. And so that's what I would do. I would practice it. And because my parents told me, I believed in it, right? But it wasn't as if like I believed for myself. It was because my parents had told me. And so as I'm practicing my religion and I'm going through hardships, I'm going through struggles, you know, because my religion, I see it as something that's kind of, you know, oppressing. And I'm pretty sure a lot of children, a lot of people, a lot of youth grew up with that same feeling, that same, you know, problem where they felt as if Islam was, you know, feeling oppressive. And when I say that, I mean people born into this society. And the reason behind that is because there's so much corruption in this society where, you know, it's like this, you know, when you have all this corruption, it seems like it's because it's the norm, because it's normalized, it seems as if it's the right thing because everybody's doing it. And so you start to question, well, why can't I do it? Why does Islam say this is wrong? And why do I have to do this? Why do I have to pray 5 times a day? Why do I have to fast during the month of Ramadan? So these are all the questions that I'm pretty sure a lot of the youth grew up with, you know, and I personally know a lot of people who've had the same issue, you know, and again, myself included. So as I'm growing older and I say, you know what, let me actually study my Islam. Let me actually read my Quran. Because every time I would open the Quran and I would look at the words, all I saw was a bunch of words, especially like in old English, you know, like, you know, thy Lord hath, you know, sent it unto thee, you know, type, you know.
Thou shalt not kill.
Exactly, you know what I mean? But that's all I would see is, oh, you know, it's just a book, okay? But then I looked and I actually started to see the verses of the Quran. I started to actually see the verses, to actually read the verses, and to actually start to understand and ponder upon. Why? Because of the trials and tribulations I went through. It urged me to, you know, look at the Quran, to actually understand what Allah is trying to tell me, the message. Allah has been trying to push me towards the straight path for so long. It's like he threw this in my way, threw this in my way, threw this in my way. Every time you walk upon the Sirat al-Mustaqim, the straight path, Allah will, if it seems as if you're going to sway it away, Allah will place hardships and trials and tribulations your way, tests your way, just to push you right back. Especially since you're someone who say that you believe or say that you submit when you say La ilaha illallah. And this was me growing up. And so Allah is saying, okay, I'm going to guide you. This is how I'm going to do it. You start to go astray, I'm going to put hardship so that you can come back to me. So as I'm reading the Quran, and this happened during the month of Ramadan, very interestingly, because this was the month of Ramadan is when the Quran was actually revealed, right? It was sent down on one special night, and that is Laylatul Qadr, the night of decree or the night of power, as some may translate it to be. And the night of decree was when the Quran came down to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ through Lil'Alameen, the trustworthy spirit, or Ruhul Qudus, the spirit of holiness, which is who we know to be as Angel Jibreel ﷺ, or Angel Gabriel. And again, interestingly, the ayats that he said to him when the Quran was revealed was Iqra, read. Read. اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. Read in the name of your Lord, the one who has created. Who has created mankind from a clot. He said, read. He took him, he squeezed them, right? So when the Quran, these verses came down, these first verses came down, this was during the last 10 nights during i'tikaf, right? And this is the time in which someone will go into seclusion, like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is the traditions that he would do. He would go into seclusion, right? And when he was in the mountains, or we would retreat to the masjid, and it has to be done at a masjid, that establishes all 5 daily prayers. And so we would retreat to the masjid and we would seclude ourselves for 10 days, the last 10 days of Ramadan, making sure that we are seeking forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and trying to catch that night, that beautiful night, Laylatul Qadr. And so as I'm in this journey of mine, I'm in i'tikaf. The first 2 years of me going into i'tikaf, I was again doing it because my father had told me to. I wasn't really doing it because I wanted to. But the third time, I went in because my father had told me to, right? It was like a tradition now. It was like, okay, I have to do it every year type thing, And this was back when it was during the summer. So it's not like I had any school or anything. I wasn't missing out or anything. I could actually go in. And as I'm in i'tikaf, I had a companion with me, and he gave me his phone to research and to learn, to study. And we're learning a surah, a chapter in the Quran together. And then sometimes the recommendation, the videos would show up, they would pop up. And what would happen is I clicked on the video, Signs of the Last Days. I said, SubhanAllah. Because when I was watching the video, I remember my father giving lectures on Signs of the Last Days. And growing up, when your father as an imam, of course I would attend pretty much every Jumu'ah, and I would always hear the same things, and I would always hear the same signs that he would say in his khutbahs. But very funny that when I opened the video, it said like it was going through like 50 or 40 signs. Personally, I only heard from my father like about, I want to say roughly 7 signs, more or less. So I'm like, hold on, there's way more signs. I'm like, wait a second. As I'm going through the signs, it started opening my eyes. I was like, this is happening today. We're seeing this today. And he told us this over 1400 years ago. Are you serious? Are you kidding me right now? And so as I'm going through these signs and my eyes is opening up, I start to tell myself, I don't want to be ignorant. I don't want to just be the one to just follow blindly, right? I don't want to, it's not like, I'm going to go out there and be led astray and do, in terms of following my own. But no, when you get to a certain age, and we talked about this yesterday morning on our Zoom call, when you get to a certain age, the age of puberty, you're held accountable for your own actions, your own deeds. But before that, it's your parents who take your sins, any actions that you have, they're held accountable for it, right? Before that, because they're the ones who are supposed to be raising you. So when you get to the age of puberty and you're going to you develop this sense where it's like you're held accountable for your own actions. Now you're at a level where you can go for yourself and see for yourself what this life is all about. And so that's what happened with me. I said, you know what? Let me actually read the Quran. Let me actually read it. Not just look at it. Let me actually read it. Understand it. See what it's trying to tell me, what Allah is trying to tell us. So I'm opening the Quran and I'm finding verses. And it's amazing how signs of the last days is what brought me to that, because it also opened my eyes to remind myself that Qiyamah is around the corner. I got to make sure I'm prepared. I got to make sure I'm ready, So as I'm looking through looking through the Quran, and I'm reading, I'm watching, I'm listening to khutbahs, and they're giving us verses from the Quran, I'm saying, subhanallah, there were times when I fell to the ground and cried, bowing my head, simply because there were certain verses that I could not relate to beforehand that I can now relate to, simply because I had to go through, the hardships that I went through. So certain verses started coming at me one by one. And subhanallah, one of the main verses that really hit me when I realized I had to change my life was, Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change that which is within themselves. I had to look at myself. And so that's when I started to really dive into my Islam, dive into my Quran. And then I started to actually gain life, true life. In fact, in this book that Zerobozo, and again, I mentioned this in one of my talks, he mentions the verse. This is when I actually first came across this verse. He mentions the verse from the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he tells us in Allah's Quran, he tells us, O ye who believe, respond to Allah and His Messenger as they call you to that which gives you life. And this is taken from Surah An-Anfal, ayat number 24. Surah Anfal, for those who don't know, is the 8th chapter of the Quran. And he goes on to say, and this is based upon the tafsir of Ibn Kathir, he says, Al-Sudi, an early commentator on the Quran, stated that this verse means that Islam gave the companions true life after they were truly dead in disbelief. The difference between faith and disbelief is truly comparable to the difference between life and death. And knowing the Quran, the source of life to which Allah and His Messenger ﷺ is calling every human, as opposed to not knowing it, is also comparable to the difference between life and death. So it goes to show, without the Quran, without this beautiful book, I really didn't have any life. I wasn't really diving into the Quran that I needed to, as much as I needed to. I wasn't diving into this beautiful book that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us. And so we look at Surah Ar-Rahman, the most merciful. That's what Ar-Rahman means. Ar-Rahman, he starts off, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts off this surah, the 55th chapter of the Quran. Ar-Rahman, علم القرآن خلق الإنسان. Ar-Rahman, starting this chapter with one of his most significant attributes, his rahmah, his mercy, his most significant attribute. Goes back to a hadith Kurtis where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, never will my wrath overtake my rahmah, my mercy. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's telling us, Ar-Rahman, علم القرآن. He is most merciful. He created the Quran. He created the Quran. He taught the Quran, rather. علم القرآن. He taught the Quran. He gave us the wisdom, the knowledge of the Quran. And when you look at how the Quran is the second thing that's mentioned right after Allah mentions His attribute of His rahmah, it shows that the Quran is the greatest mercy to mankind. So when it goes to خلق الإنسان, right next to that, right after that, the creation of mankind, it shows the soul comes first, then the creation of mankind. Look at how Allah aligns these words. He could have said the creation of mankind first, and then the revelation of the Quran, but no, He said Quran first, then the creation of mankind. Because without the Quran, it's as if you have no life. And so when I looked at my past self, from now looking at my past self, it really is a difference. Yes, I had some Islam, but I had way more life now. I have way more life now than I did in the past. It was really like as if I was a walking corpse. And to those like the disbelievers, you know, those who don't like really want to choose to believe and want to really like study the Quran and everything like that, you know, to them it may be, you know, even more so like they're the walking dead, you know. But alhamdulillah, that was pretty much my journey. You know, I didn't really mean to talk for that long, but that's pretty much what happened. I told myself not to be ignorant. I told myself that I really want to see what this Islam has to offer. Let me just see. And then as I started to do that, my character started to change. And as I applied it to my daily lifestyle, when I was younger, I was that little boy that was kind of a nuisance to everyone. But as I got older, everything flipped around and I found people just drawn towards me. And I didn't want the attention, but I found people just started to incline towards me. And I said, SubhanAllah, this is the effect of the Quran. Right?
That's a beautiful story.
Alhamdulillah.
Man. I don't know how I'm gonna back that up.
I mean, we all got our own stories.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, excuse me. So for me, my story is a lot more of a roller coaster, you would say. I've been in Catholic school my entire life, from second grade all the way up until I graduated from high school. And during that time, there was obviously the steps that you have to do to become Catholic, and it was something that I never did. I was Christianized as a baby, but I obviously don't remember any of that. Just saw pictures. So I never got baptized as an adult. Never took my communion or anything. So becoming Muslim was a huge step to me, because it was actually my first time really sitting down and accepting a religion. And how that came to be was this war in Philistine and between them and Israel. It wasn't my first time being introduced to Islam, but it was my first time where I really sat down and actually looked into it. I knew about it, I knew it was a thing, but I didn't really know much about what it means to actually be a Muslim man of faith. So with that being said, the month of Ramadan came by, and as I told Muhammad last night, it was really funny because now I think about it. The day before Ramadan started, it was so Ramadan started on Monday. The day before, I was at my mom's church, and I spoke a speech about faith and having faith. And it's really crazy because I think about it, I'm like, I kind of felt like it was my goodbye speech in a way to Catholicism, and leaning more towards Islam. So the month of Ramadan started, and I told myself, you know what, I'm gonna fast for 3 days. And I was being told to like fast on the last 10 days instead of the first few days, because you get more rewards in the last 10 days. But I was like, I love food. I'm going to get it out the way immediately. So I don't want it to be on my conscience. I'm just going to fast these 2 days and then deal with it later. But then, so I fasted the first 3 days, like I said. And the next thing you know, I was like, you know what, I can continue. I'm going to let it go for like a week. So I extended the 3 days into a week. And then the week ended, and I was like, I kind of have a routine going on. I'm waking up 4 o'clock in the morning to eat my food, take a nap, and then wake back up, go to work, and then deal with work. I found myself very productive at work, just doing anything, maintaining friendships. And, that 7 days ended up turning into doing the entire month of Ramadan, which is 30 days. And during that time, my first time ever in a mosque was during the last week of Ramadan. So I guess that's a good thing, that instead of doing my fast in the last 10 days, I went to my first ever mosque during the last 10 days. and at that mosque, they had gave me a bunch of papers and pamphlets about what is Islam, the differences between Christianity and Islam, the similarities between Christian and Islam, being Christian and being a Muslim, and it all just spoke to me completely. It was explaining things that I had in my brain and questions that I had before I even knew that I had the questions to them. You know, it was like I was reading it, didn't even know I wanted to ask that question, but it was just answering it. And it was truly a beautiful time. I almost wanted to cry reading some of these papers and pamphlets talking about the dangers of shirk and what it means to be Muslim and what we do for prayer time. And like, it was definitely weird hearing as a newcomer that you're going to be making wudu every single time before you make your salat. And I guarantee you, I was definitely hearing the word voodoo for the first 5 times. So I was a little scared. But the act of wudu, of cleansing yourself for salat, which is the most important part of being Islam, I thought that was a beautiful thing, and all of this just made me gravitate towards taking my shahada on Eid day, which is the last day of Ramadan. So doing that, alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Doing that on Eid was kind of like present to myself for going through Ramadan and taking these 30 days of sacrifice. But at the end of the day, looking back on it, it never felt like a sacrifice. It felt like a new coming. It felt like I was entering a new me. And I have Islam to thank for that. And it wasn't until recently, in the last few weeks or so, I keep thinking that I've been Muslim for like 8 months, but it's only been 2 months, you know?
I know, right? It feels longer.
It feels a lot longer. I took my shahada on April 10th, and it's only
Alhamdulillah. I mean, that's actually how fast you've been improving.
Yeah,
I've been watching you. I'm
crazy.
just like, like when you quoted the ayah the other day, I was like, Jace,
but I'm actually going to reference that. That Surah Masad. That was the first time I ever looked at a tafsir about surah. And what tafsirs are basically just explanations about the surah, whatever surah you're learning. And in that tafsir, he was telling about this, I don't even know, was he a general or something, Abdul-Kareem.
He's the uncle of the Prophet Muhammad.
I knew he was the uncle, but I think he was like a general as well. Or something.
Yeah, like he was one of the leaders of the Quraysh, I guess you could say.
He was related to Prophet Muhammad. Peace be upon him. And that surah talks about the punishment that he received, for him and his wife received, for not believing and wanting to hurt Prophet Muhammad and not believing the teachings of Allah, peace be upon him. And that surah made me get even more strict with my way of taking Islam, because for the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he has no, I guess, mercy, despite him being an uncle of the Prophet Muhammad. It kind of shook me in a way, because not really shook me, but it just made me want to be more strict and making sure I'm hitting my salat time. I'm waking up early for Fajr. I'm making sure that I'm praying on time. I'm not delaying anything. And I started getting into this surah almost a day after I was out, and I completely missed maybe three salats that day. And I went to sleep like annoyed that I missed my salats. And I woke up the next day and I was like, all right, time to pick a new surah, and Surah Masad is what I landed on. And for that to happen the day after, it just made me be more strict. And no matter what, I want to make sure that I'm a better Muslim, and I have Islam to think about, to thank for that. And even though I don't know the meaning of a lot of these words, the English translation of a lot of the words, still studying the Quran, reading the Quran, reciting the Quran, it kind of creates structure in my life. Days like today, I'm off from work because one day I'm really truly off from work, and I'm spending my time doing a podcast, doing a podcast about Islam, and then after I'm going to be in the masjid probably the rest of the evening. So, it provides a sense of structure for my life. But the main thing that I truly, truly love about Islam that separates it from the other religions is the sense of that if your heart and if your mind is not in it, it's not going to be a beneficial religion for you. This religion is truly with the self. And if you are, I'm not going to say if you're not self-teaching yourself, because if you go to any masjid, there is someone that's going to be willing to teach you. But if you are not willing to look within yourself, to grow, to create some type of self-discipline, it's not going to be a religion that's worthwhile. There's been so many times in the last month that I've looked at a situation and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so angry, I'm so annoyed. But I would pray, always happen that it'll be around a salat time, and I'll pray my salat, astaghfirullah, and I would come out of it and just feel like completely at ease about whatever is happening. And I remember watching a YouTuber, can't remember his name, but he was saying that there's a specific dua that you say when someone is sick. And he was like, don't think about that too much. If someone is sick, just recite Surah Al-Fatiha, which is something that we all know as Muslims. Surah Al-Fatiha is the perfect dua to say for someone who is sick. So I kind of use that in my own way, where something is annoying me, I'm reciting Surah Al-Fatiha. So if I get annoyed, if I get pissed off, if I get angry about something, I'll recite Surah Al-Fatiha, and I'll feel at ease, I'll feel at peace. So yeah, that is my story, and that is
Yeah. I don't know about you not being able to follow that up. That was pretty good. Yeah, we all have our own stories, and it's very, very beautiful. And when it comes to faith in general, like I like to always say, the best thing that you can really do is seek knowledge, seek guidance, right? You can go to Islam, Christianity, to Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, whatever it is. Just make sure you have an open heart and an open mind, and you're someone willing to actually learn and seek truth. And then let the Lord of creation guide you. Let him guide you. If you don't want to be guided, then you can look for as much information as you want, but with that biased opinion, the thing that's going to happen is that you're going to look for anything that either proves what you want to believe in is correct, or that proves what you don't want to believe in is wrong. You're going to look for any small thing, even if it's something that's so weak, you're going to go with it. So as long as you have an open heart and an open mind, inshallah ta'ala, you will be guided. And you have to not be afraid of change. Don't be afraid of change. Don't be afraid to implement faith, to implement, a certain level of morality in your life, value in your life. Don't be afraid to take that extra step and say, just because everyone else is doing it doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't make it right. He sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, be in this world as a stranger. Travel this world as a stranger. So even if everyone is doing something, if it's haram, if it's impermissible, if it's not right, if it's corrupted, then even though everyone is doing it, you can be that one to be strange from everybody else, to be different from everybody else, and say, I'm going to do what I feel is right, do what I know is right, what I have found to be right through my research, through my guidance that I obtained or that I had. And so that's pretty much the gist of, when it comes to seeking faith, seeking knowledge, seeking guidance, that's pretty much what you have to do. Open your heart up, open your mind. Because if you don't, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says for the disbelievers, ختم الله على قلوبهم وعلى سمعهم وعلى أبصارهم غشاوة ولهم عذاب عظيم. He says, and Allah has set a seal over their hearts, the qulub, and the sami', the hearing, and over their eyes is a ghishawa, is a veil, and for them is the most terrible punishment. So to summarize this whole thing, just important to seek knowledge, seek guidance, and the best knowledge or guidance that we have come to found, that we've sought, especially in times like these, is the knowledge and guidance of the Quran. And when you look at the Quran, you don't just look at the Quran, you read it, and you don't just read the Quran, you understand it. As Jace was talking about, he was looking at the tafsir, right? When you look at the tafsir of each verses, each ayat, how they were revealed, you find that in the hadith. Because we don't just have the Quran, we have the hadiths as well. You can't be a Muslim if you only follow the Quran. You must follow the hadiths as well, the authentic hadiths. Why? Because the Quran tells you, that the hadiths show you. He sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said he left us with Allah and His sunnah, His message. Allah, the message that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to him, and the way he carried it out, his practice. So that's pretty much what we wanted to talk about today. So alhamdulillah, once again, thank you again, Jace, for coming out.
Of course, anytime.
And speaking. So inshallah, maybe we'll do this again.
Inshallah.
And hopefully we'll have another topic that we'll talk about that's, pretty juicy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
Inshallah. So on that note, I just want to say, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon all of you. I forgot the name of my podcast. A Fruitful Voice, where there's a voice to be heard. Okay. All right.
Take two.
Assalamu alaikum. May peace be. Okay. Take three. Is my mic on?
Yeah. I hope.
Yeah. Let me turn this fan off. Assalamu alaikum. May peace be upon all of you. We are here on a Fruitful Voice podcast, where there is a voice to be heard. And we have a guest.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to a Fruitful Voice, sponsored by Chips Ahoy.
No, we're not putting that in the face. Oh my goodness. Chips Ahoy. Yeah, sponsor. I can't get a cookie. Oh, there we go.